The champagne flutes glittered under the chandelier, each glass catching the golden light like a promise. Music swirled through the air. Soft jazz played for elegance. And every guest leaned in, waiting for the toast that would mark the end of one life chapter and the beginning of another. Elaine Carter, 70 years old, newly retired after selling her business for $23 million, stood at the center of it all. Her smile was gracious, her posture regal. She had planned every detail of this night, from the flowers that matched her gown to the exact vintage of champagne resting in crystal buckets of ice. Nothing about this party was left to chance. Nothing, except the glass in her hand. Across the room, her daughter-in-law, Brittany, leaned closer to the drink table. With the skill of someone who had practiced, Brittany palmed a tiny vial from her clutch purse. She tilted it over a single flute, the liquid disappearing in an instant. Her laugh rang out a moment later, sweet and effortless, as though nothing had happened. But Elaine saw. She always saw. For years, she had used the same chipped champagne glass at gatherings, an old habit to keep from offering it to guests. Tonight, Brittany had chosen that glass, thinking it was an accident, thinking no one would notice. Elaine noticed. And when the moment was right, when a neighbor leaned in to compliment Brittany's tennis bracelet, when the chatter was loudest, Elaine's hand moved with calm precision. She set her own flute aside and traded it with the one resting near Marjorie's handbag. Seconds later, the toast began. Glasses clinked. 100 eyes turned toward the guest of honor. Then, a sound cut through the celebration. A body hitting marble. Marjorie, Brittany's own mother, jerked violently on the floor, as though invisible strings had yanked her down. Foam bubbled at the corners of her mouth. Her hands clawed at the air before falling limp against the tiles. The room collapsed into chaos. Screams. Phones fumbling to dial 911. Guests shoving back from the table. Their laughter strangled into silence. The music crackled into static before someone killed the speaker. And in the center of it all, Elaine stood unmoved. She did not cry out. She did not rush forward. She simply watched. Watched her daughter-in-law fall to her knees beside her convulsing mother. Watched those delicate hands tremble, shaking so perfectly it could have won an actress an award. Brittany gasped, whispered for help, pressed a hand to her mother's chest. Elaine almost applauded, because 10 minutes earlier, she had seen that same hand doctor one particular glass. She had seen the betrayal. She had seen the plan. And tonight, that plan had failed. Elaine's pulse remained steady. Her smile never faltered. She hadn't built an empire by being easy to kill. This was only the beginning. Retirement parties are supposed to be sweet. A little sentimental, a little celebratory. For Elaine Carter, it was meant to be both. A farewell to decades of building her consulting firm, and a toast to the fortune she had earned through discipline, shrewdness, and patience. $23 million sat safely in her accounts, a testament to 70 years of surviving, learning, and outthinking people who had underestimated her. The Carter home gleamed with the polish of wealth and taste. Crystal chandeliers scattered light across marble floors. A jazz trio tucked neatly into the corner played mellow tunes, while waiters floated between guests with silver trays. The air was thick with perfume, expensive cologne, and the soft buzz of conversations weaving over each other. Guests admired the art on the walls, the rare bottles of champagne chilling in ornate buckets, and the grandeur of a woman who had built a fortune with her own hands. Elaine moved through the crowd with practiced grace, her smile fixed and welcoming. She had hosted countless events over the years, client dinners, corporate galas, holiday gatherings. But this one was different. This one was personal. She was celebrating her freedom. For the first time in decades, she was no longer responsible for deadlines, employees, or board meetings. She was finally allowed to enjoy what she had built. And yet attention undercut the music. It wasn't the house, which sparkled. It wasn't the guests, who seemed delighted. It wasn't even Elaine herself, who wore retirement like a queen's crown. The anise came from one corner of the room, where Brittany Carter, her daughter-in-law, stood with her designer clutch and practiced smile. Brittany was the kind of woman people admired at first glance. Stylish, polished, always ready with a charming laugh. But Elaine had learned long ago that shine could hide rot. Brittany's boutique bled money. Her spending outpaced her income. And her marriage to Elaine's son, Daniel, had the shallow warmth of a spotlight. It only looked good if you didn't stare too closely. Elaine knew all this. She also knew how people looked at $23 million. Like a prize. Like a solution. Like a target. So when Brittany slipped a tiny vial from her purse, Elaine's instincts screamed. It happened quickly. Too quickly for anyone else to notice. Brittany leaned near the drinks table, her bracelet catching the light like a deliberate distraction. She tilted the vial over a single flute, the contents disappearing in an instant. Then she laughed, brushing off a compliment about her jewelry, her hand lingering just a moment too long on the stem of the glass. Elaine's heart should have raced, but it didn't. Instead, her pulse steadied. Her eyes narrowed. She had faced ruthless competitors in boardrooms, condescending investors who thought age and gender made her weak, clients who had tried to outmaneuver her. She had survived all of them. Brittany was no different. The chipped champagne flute sat among the others, harmless to anyone who didn't know its history. Elaine had always used it for herself, the imperfection making it easy to separate from the set. She never offered it to guests, never risked embarrassment. Tonight, Brittany had chosen that glass, likely assuming Elaine would reach for it by habit. It was clever. Almost clever enough. Elaine smiled, lifting the poisoned flute, cradling it like it was any other. Across the room, Brittany's eyes sparkled as if waiting for the curtain to rise on a play she had written. Elaine gave her nothing. No flinch, no hesitation, no clue, because Elaine already knew. This was not going to be the toast Brittany expected. The toast never reached her lips. One moment, glasses were rising toward the chandeliers, golden bubbles fizzing in the light. The next, a shriek tore through the music. Marjorie, the woman everyone politely called Brittany's mother, as though her identity began and ended with her daughter, was on the marble floor, her body twisted in a violent spasm, heels scraping against stone. Foam bubbled at the corners of her mouth. Her eyes rolled back, and her limbs jerked like a puppet whose strings had been yanked too hard. For a second, silence clamped down on the room. Then came the storm. "Call 911, someone shouted. Glasses toppled onto linen cloths, shattering. A neighbor dropped a plate of hors d'oeuvres, shrimp scattering like confetti across the floor. The jazz trio froze mid-song, one note quivering in the air before the sound collapsed into static. Guests swarmed, but not toward Marjorie, away from her. Some pressed themselves against the walls. Others covered their mouths as if the scene itself were contagious. Someone screamed. Someone else began sobbing. Chaos wrapped the party in a suffocating blanket. Elaine didn't move at first. She stood, tall and composed, champagne flute still in her hand. Her eyes never left Brittany, because she remembered. 10 minutes earlier, she had seen that hand slip a vial from a clutch. She had watched the liquid disappear into the glass, the chipped flute she always reserved for herself. She had seen the way Brittany smiled afterward, like a cat who had nudged poison into cream, and she had acted. Calmly, quietly. She had exchanged the flute for the one near Marjorie's handbag. Now, as Marjorie convulsed on the floor, Brittany fell to her knees beside her mother, performing grief so perfectly it deserved applause. Her voice broke in sobs. Her hands fluttered uselessly against her mother's shoulders. Mom, stay with me. Somebody help her." Elaine almost laughed. Instead, she bent gracefully, the perfect hostess tending to an ill guest. "Clear some space," she said firmly, her tone cutting through the panic like glass through fabric. People obeyed. They always obeyed. Daniel pushed through the crowd at last, his tie loosened, his face pale. "What happened?" he demanded. His eyes darted from his mother to his wife to Marjorie's convulsing form. For the briefest flicker, half a heartbeat longer than shock required. He looked at Brittany with something more dangerous than confusion. Knowledge. Paramedics burst through the door, their calm movements a jarring contrast to the hysteria around them. They knelt, checked vitals, lifted Marjorie's limp body onto a gurney. "She's still breathing," one announced. "Possible ingestion, cardiac involvement. We need to move fast." Brittany clutched at the paramedic's sleeve. "Please, please save her," she cried, tears streaking her mascara. Daniel steadied her, slipping an arm around her shoulders. He looked convincing, protective. But Elaine had seen enough men in her lifetime to know when the performance didn't match the soul. She kept her smile steady as she asked, "Which hospital?" "Riverside General." The lead paramedic replied, pushing the gurney toward the door. "I'll follow," Elaine said brightly, though Daniel tried to protest. "Mom, no, you should stay. We'll handle it. We'll update you." His hand pressed her elbow, guiding, shepherding, the same gesture his father once used to guide Elaine through crowded rooms. But this wasn't guidance. It was containment. How considerate, Elaine thought. Keep the target at the scene of the crime while the conspirators regroup. She smiled at a neighbor pretending not to eavesdrop, then slipped her keys from the bowl by the door. The party chatter was dead now, curdled in the air like spoiled cream. Behind her, she left scattered glasses, fallen canapes, and the faint echo of jazz cut off mid-beat. In front of her, a hospital waited, and answers. Hospitals smell the same no matter how much money you've made. Disinfectant and burnt coffee, bleach and nerves. The sharp, metallic edge of fear that clings to every waiting room chair. Elaine sat in Riverside General's emergency ward, hands folded neatly in her lap. She could have been waiting for a dinner reservation. To her right, a vending machine hummed like a tired heart. Across from her, a clock ticked too loudly, stretching each minute into an hour. Brittany's heels clicked across the tile, restless and deliberate. The rhythm of a woman who wanted the room to notice her grief. She wrung her hands. She pressed her palms together beneath her chin, as if she were a saint in a stained glass window. Every few minutes, her voice cracked with the same line. "This is terrible. I can't believe this happened." Too polished. Too rehearsed. Daniel sat nearby, slouched in a chair, shoulders rigid. He didn't fidget, didn't cry, didn't console. His phone rested on his knee, screen down, as though even the device might betray him if he so much as glanced at it. He stared straight ahead, jaw clenched tight enough to splinter teeth. Elaine watched them both. She always watched. A doctor murmured to a nurse as they passed the waiting room. Plant alkaloids, possible ingestion. Another scribbled unknown toxin across a chart. Elaine filed it away silently. Knowledge was power, but timing was survival. When the doctor finally returned to them, his words were clipped. "Careful. She's stable. She'll stay overnight for observation. Tests are inconclusive for now." Polite language, Elaine thought. A way to say poison without saying poison. Brittany gasped, clutching her chest. "Stable? Oh, thank God." Tears pooled in her eyes with perfect punctuality. She looked around as if searching for witnesses to her relief. Then her voice softened, delicate as tissue. "I just can't imagine how this happened." Elaine touched her daughter-in-law's arm with grandmotherly kindness. "These things are mysterious, dear." Her smile was gentle, her eyes steady. But she only sipped a little before she fell. Thank goodness it wasn't more. For just a heartbeat, Brittany faltered. "The champagne?" she asked, her tone too light, too quick. Elaine smiled again. It was amazing how much a smile could hide. "Oh, I'm probably just seeing patterns." Brittany's gaze flicked to Daniel, who finally looked away from his silent phone. His expression cracked for only a second, long enough for Elaine to see a shadow of recognition. He knew something. He didn't want to, but he did. The air between husband and wife tightened like a rope. Hours passed. Nurses moved like ghosts. Paramedics rolled in fresh emergencies. The vending machine ate coins. Elaine kept her back straight, her breath calm, her mind working. She thought of the vial, the chipped glass, the steady hand that had swapped one flute for another. She thought of the way Daniel hadn't seemed surprised when Marjorie fell. Elaine Carter had built her empire on two truths. People always reveal themselves, and silence was the most powerful weapon in the world. Tonight, both truths stood at her side. At last, Daniel rose. "I'll drive you home, Mom," he offered, his tone a shade too careful. A son's concern shaped like a trap. Elaine smiled. That same bright hostess smile. "That's kind, darling. But I'll manage. I'm not fond of being chauffeured anywhere I didn't choose to go." She gathered her coat, nodded politely at the nurses, and walked out into the night air. Behind her, Brittany's voice rose again, thin, practiced, desperate. Ahead of her, the truth waited to be uncovered, and Elaine intended to uncover all of it. The house was silent when Elaine returned, its bones creaking in the familiar way old homes do when the party lights are gone and only shadows remain. She hung her coat, slipped off her shoes, and walked straight to her study. On the counter, the champagne bottle still waited, 3/4 full, glistening like a snake in its coil. Brittany had opened it earlier, smiling too brightly as though generosity were a shield. Elaine left it untouched. Instead, she poured herself a glass from an unopened bottle, the good champagne, the kind she never shared, and carried it to her desk. Numbers calmed her. Always had. She flipped open a fresh notepad and began a list. Daniel's architectural firm, limping for 2 years. A handful of clients, fewer paychecks. His last major project had run over budget, bleeding his reputation dry. Investors had backed away. Loans lingered like unpaid ghosts. Brittany's boutique, a boutique in name only, more a vanity project than a business. Rent in arrears. Suppliers demanding payment. Credit cards stretched to their limits. Her store bled cash faster than she could invent excuses. And still, designer bags, jewelry, tennis bracelets sparkling on her wrist under party lights. Expenses. 2 luxury cars. A mortgage stacked on another mortgage. The constant churn of holidays and vacations. Always requiring the newest phone, the latest tablet, the next fashionable thing. Elaine's pen moved swiftly, line after line, debt after debt. She had tallied balance sheets for decades. Corporations, clients, her own empire. The pattern here was no different. Red ink, desperation, recklessness. She underlined the total. The sum was obscene. Now, she thought, add 23 million to the equation. It wasn't just inheritance. It was salvation. To Daniel and Brittany, she wasn't a mother or a mother-in-law. She was a vault, a solution, a problem to be solved with one decisive act. Elaine leaned back, sipping her champagne. The bitter edge of realization settled across her tongue like ash. People killed for less, much less, and Brittany hadn't just tried to poison her. She had done it in front of everyone, confident no one would notice, confident Elaine herself would never suspect. That was the mistake. Elaine Carter had built her fortune on reading the hidden lines in contracts, catching the fine print others skimmed past, spotting the flaw no one wanted to admit. Numbers never lied. And tonight, they told her everything she needed to know. Motive wasn't love. Motive wasn't resentment. Motive was money. Elaine closed her notepad, slipped it into the drawer, and locked it. Her enemies were in her family, and for the first time since selling her company, Elaine felt truly alive. The morning after Marjorie's collapse, the house smelled of coffee and lemon polish. Elaine sat at the kitchen table, the newspaper folded beside her untouched. She had slept little but well enough, her mind sharp, her resolve sharper. At 9 o'clock sharp, Daniel arrived. Not alone. Brittany trailed him, carrying a bakery bag with the exaggerated cheer of someone bringing an offering to a temple. "Morning, Mom," Daniel said, his smile pulled tight. He leaned down to kiss her cheek. Brittany followed with a too bright, "We thought you might want breakfast." Elaine welcomed them with the same smile she'd used on hostile investors. Warm enough to look genuine, cool enough to keep her distance. How thoughtful. Leave it on the counter. Brittany set the bag down, then made a show of arranging pastries on a plate. Almond croissants, flaky and sweet. Props, Elaine thought. Props in a play that had already been written. They all sat. Daniel didn't touch the food. He folded his hands, a habit from childhood when he wanted to look serious. Elaine watched him closely, recognizing the rhythm of what was coming. You've been through a lot. He began gently. And you're 70 now alone in this big house. His voice softened, rehearsed concern dripping like honey. We worry about you. Elaine sipped her coffee, let the silence stretch until he shifted uncomfortably. Do you? She asked. Daniel pushed forward. There are communities designed for people like you. Not nursing homes, resorts. Places where you're cared for, where everything is managed, safe, secure, social. Brittany chimed in eagerly. Silver Pines, for example. It's beautiful. Spa, classes, medical staff on site. It would give you peace of mind, and us too. You deserve to be comfortable. Elaine turned the newspaper page with deliberate slowness. Convenient, she said. For whom? Neither answered. Daniel pulled out his phone and slid it across the table. On the screen glowed a glossy website. All golden light and smiling retirees in yoga classes. Silver Pines. Retirement living redefined. Elaine glanced at it once before sliding it back. Lovely brochure. Brittany leaned forward, eyes shining. Of course, there's an entrance fee. $400,000. But it covers everything. Food, medical, housing. It's all inclusive. And, Daniel added smoothly, they'll need some paperwork. Just for precaution, a financial disclosure, and someone to manage things legally on your behalf. You know, power of attorney. The words were soft, casual. But they landed heavy, sharp. Elaine kept her expression bright, even cheerful. Inside, her mind worked like gears in a machine. So this is the plan. Remove me from my home. Strip me of control. Sign away everything. Neatly packaged under the guise of love. She laughed lightly, the kind of laugh that made her sound every bit the gracious retiree. Power of attorney? How serious? Just precautionary, Daniel said, lowering his voice. In case you were ever unable to make decisions yourself. Elaine met her son's eyes. For a moment she saw the little boy who once brought her dandelions in grubby fists, proud as if they were roses. Then she blinked, and the boy was gone. In his place sat a man with debts in his eyes and betrayal on his tongue. I'll think about it, she said smoothly, setting her coffee down. Brittany's smile widened, triumph flickering too quickly to hide. Elaine smiled back. The mask of agreement was easier than the truth, and masks, she knew, were useful things. Inside, she was already planning her next move. The next morning, Elaine walked into Leonard Harris's office with the calm stride of a woman who had already made her decision. The law firm sat on the top floor of a downtown building, its windows turning the city below into a chessboard. Leonard, her attorney of 20 years, rose from behind his oak desk, his salt and pepper hair as sharp as his tailored suit. Elaine, he said warmly, extending a hand. I thought I might be hearing from you. She took his hand, her grip steady. Then you know why I'm here. He gestured for her to sit. Sunlight spilled across the leather chairs, catching the edge of a row of legal tomes. Elaine sat straight-backed, her handbag resting neatly on her lap. She wasted no time. Brittany tried to poison me. Leonard didn't flinch. He'd heard confessions that broke other men's composure. Instead, he leaned forward slightly, pen poised above his legal pad. Tell me everything. Elaine recounted the details. The chipped glass, the vial, the switch, Marjorie collapsing, Daniel's insistence she stay behind, and their push for Silver Pines with a power of attorney. Leonard's pen moved in deliberate strokes, notes precise and lean. When she finished, the office fell silent. The hum of the city outside seemed very far away. You're certain? He asked finally. I am, Elaine said. Her voice was flat, unshakable. Leonard set the pen down. Proof will be difficult, even if toxicology confirms poison. Intent is slippery in court. They'll argue accident, confusion, stress. But we don't need to chase intent. Not yet. We can take another approach first. His eyes sharpened. We document your competence. That way, any attempt to declare you unfit will crumble. Elaine felt her chest expand with the first full breath she'd taken in days. Go on. I'll arrange an evaluation with a geriatric psychiatrist. Not one of those hired guns families shop for results. Someone with a reputation for impartiality. You'll sit the tests, and we'll put the results on record. Baseline cognitive function, medical evidence of soundness. Once it's filed, any challenge they mount will look like fraud. And the estate? Elaine asked. Leonard slid a folder across the desk, thick with papers. We restructure. Trusts recast. Medical directives rewritten. A will that leaves them what you choose, not what they expect. Fraud alerts on every account. Your assets will be as slippery as mercury to anyone but you. Elaine opened the folder, scanning the neat stacks of directives and legal jargon. Her reflection stared back at her from the glossy paper. An old woman to some, but not to herself. To herself, she was steel. For years, she said slowly, I built an empire with contracts like these. Now I'll use them to build a fortress. Leonard smiled faintly. Exactly. They spent the next 2 hours reviewing documents. Elaine signed her name in confident strokes, each signature a declaration. I am not done. I am not weak. I am not theirs to manage. When the last page was complete, Leonard leaned back, satisfied. You've taken back the board. They don't even know the game has changed. Elaine stood, gathering her things. The city stretched wide and bright beyond the glass, but she didn't feel small in its shadow. She felt tall, steady, and dangerous. As she reached the door, Leonard called after her. One more thing, Elaine. She turned. Consider security. Cameras. Sensors. A panic pendant. If they're desperate enough to try once, they'll try again. Elaine's smile was sharp. The kind that once closed multi-million-dollar deals. Then let them. I've survived worse than desperate children. She walked out, heels clicking against marble. Each step an announcement. Elaine Carter was not prey. She was preparing for war. By the time Elaine returned home from Leonard's office, her decision was made. She had survived a poisoned glass. She wouldn't give her enemies a second chance. The next morning, 3 unmarked vans rolled into her driveway. The technicians moved quickly, quietly, almost invisibly, like ghosts in work boots. They carried toolboxes and spools of cable, small black cameras no larger than a thumb, and discrete sensors slim enough to vanish against molding. Elaine offered them coffee, then let them get to work. Within hours, her house transformed. Tiny eyes blinked to life in the corners of ceilings. Motion detectors disappeared into the seams of walls. A sleek keypad glowed faintly by the front door, linked to a security hub that connected directly to the city police dispatch. The lead technician handed her a small device, a pendant on a chain. Panic button, he explained. Press it once. Officers are dispatched immediately. Average response time, 3 minutes. Elaine turned it over in her palm, its weight strangely reassuring. She slipped it into her pocket. 3 minutes is plenty, she said. Her neighbors would be told a simple story about package theft, an excuse easy enough to believe. No one needed to know the truth, that she was building a fortress not against strangers, but against her own family. When the technicians finished, Elaine walked the house in silence, testing her new eyes. From her phone, she watched the feed, angles of her kitchen, the foyer, the hallway, even the quiet corners of her study. The cameras saw what she saw. The microphones caught what she could not. The house no longer creaked like an old woman's bones. It hummed with vigilance. Elaine paused in her study, staring at her reflection in the dark screen before the cameras activated. Once, she might have thought this was paranoia. Now she knew better. Paranoia was a survival skill. a sharpened edge. She touched the panic pendant again. For the first time since the party, her heart felt calm. This was no longer the home of an aging retiree. It was a citadel. From this moment forward, Elaine was not prey waiting for the next strike. She was the hunter, watching, waiting, ready. The doorbell rang at 3 in the afternoon. Elaine didn't need the new front camera to know who it was. She had already learned to recognize the rhythm of Daniel's knock. Sharp and apologetic. She opened the door to find them smiling too brightly. Daniel in slate slacks, trying for professionalism. Brittany in cream and gold, her perfume arriving half a second before she did. We were in the neighborhood. Brittany trilled, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Daniel followed, carrying a leather folio tucked under his arm. Elaine smiled graciously. How thoughtful. I was just about to make tea. They sat at the kitchen table, their hands folded neatly like parishioners. Brittany leaned forward, eyes glittering. We're still so shaken about Mom, she began, her voice wobbling on cue. And we're worried about you, Elaine. Truly, Daniel added smoothly. Silver Pines is still holding an opening. It would give us peace of mind to know you're cared for. Elaine poured tea with the steady hands of a hostess. She placed the porcelain cups gently before them, each saucer aligned. Peace of mind is a wonderful thing, she said, smiling as though the words were sincere. She had already decided to give them something better than peace. Bait. Earlier that morning, she'd made a few phone calls. Leonard had drafted a decoy power of attorney. On the surface, it looked sweeping and grand, durable, broad authority, access to accounts. But in paragraph 4, in language most eyes skipped over, it limited control to a single checking account she had opened that same day with a deposit of $100. The account came with online access, a username and password scrawled neatly on a page marked Financials. Temporary login. That page now rested inside a pristine pastry box. The box sat on the desk in her study, tissue paper folded carefully, as if covering a treasure. Elaine set her cup down. You're right, of course. I've been thinking about Silver Pines. About simplifying. It sounds convenient. Brittany's smile widened, triumphant and eager. Daniel exhaled like a man who had just closed a deal. There's just a little paperwork, Daniel said carefully, producing the folio. If we get you in the queue now, you'll be secure. We can handle the forms for you. Power of attorney. Disclosure statements. It's all standard. Elaine lifted her brows. So much responsibility for you both. Brittany reached across the table, patting Elaine's hand with faux tenderness. We're family. It's what we do. Elaine returned the gesture with grandmotherly warmth. Though her eyes never softened, inside, she marveled at how easy it was to let people dig their own graves. All you had to do was hand them the shovel. I'll gather what I have, she said, rising. She walked to the study, letting her heels click against the hardwood. Behind her, the cameras recorded every flicker of anticipation on Brittany's face, every restless shift in Daniel's chair. In the study, Elaine opened the desk drawer and pulled out the pastry box. She carried it back like a hostess presenting dessert. I keep receipts in here, she explained lightly. She set it on the corner of the desk, deliberately casual, and returned to her chair. I'll look through later. But she left the box half-turned, the tissue inside folded, just slightly ajar. Daniel's eyes lingered on it for a fraction too long. Brittany's hand twitched toward it before she caught herself. Elaine poured more tea. No rush, of course. Big decisions deserve morning light. Brittany and Daniel smiled and nodded, performing patience they didn't feel. By the time they left, their voices hushed in the driveway. Elaine was watching them on her phone's camera feed. She saw Daniel glance toward the house, saw Brittany gesture angrily, her lips tight with frustration. The bait had been set. Now all she had to do was wait for them to bite. The next evening, Elaine's phone chimed with an unfamiliar brightness. We're coming over for dinner. No takebacks. The text carried Brittany's signature blend of faux warmth and subtle command. Elaine smiled at the screen, though her lips didn't reach her eyes. By 6, The couple arrived, sweeping in like actors hitting their marks. Daniel carried another bakery bag. Always the props, Elaine thought, while Brittany moved straight to the kitchen, untying her coat as though she lived there. "We'll cook for you tonight," Brittany sang, setting ingredients on the counter. Peppers, pasta, a bottle of wine she didn't bother to ask if Elaine wanted. Elaine leaned against the doorway, arms folded. "How thoughtful," she said, her tone smooth. The cameras in the kitchen blinked silently, recording everything. Brittany chopped vegetables with exaggerated flair, her chatter constant. Twice she nudged the stove burners higher than the recipe called for, her sleeve brushing dangerously close to the flame. Twice Elaine wandered by, turning the knobs back down with absent-minded ease. On the third pass, Brittany accidentally twisted a knob to ignite while laughing at her own story. The burner hissed, but it didn't catch. Elaine didn't miss the way Brittany's eyes flicked toward the gas detector on the wall before her laugh trailed into silence. "Careful, dear," Elaine said pleasantly. "This old house doesn't forgive carelessness." Brittany forced a giggle. "Of course. I'm such a klutz." Elaine set sparkling water on the table, opening the bottle herself, pouring each glass in full view of the cameras. Daniel lifted his wine, sipped, and watched her over the rim. He thought he was subtle. He wasn't. Dinner was polite, strained. Elaine let them fill the air with empty words, nodding at stories rehearsed for sympathy. When they left, the rain had started. She watched them stand between their cars in the driveway, huddled close, their faces lit by the glow of Brittany's phone. Her phone buzzed a minute later. An automated alert access attempt detected. Greenwood Bank. New login. IP. Guest Wi-Fi. Elaine's smile was slow, deliberate. She walked to her study, her slippers whispering across the wood. The pastry box sat on the desk, tissue paper folded precisely as she had left it, but the fold was shifted, barely an inch, as though someone had lifted it and smoothed it back with nervous hands. She opened her phone. Another alert. Transfer attempt failed. Daily limit exceeded. The decoy account had caught its first bite. Elaine sat at her desk, sipping the last of her sparkling water, and watched the live feed of her driveway. Daniel and Brittany were still arguing, their gestures sharp in the rain. Desperation had a smell. It wasn't just sweat or panic. It was the stink of people who believed the trap was closing around them and clawed harder to find a way out. Elaine had spent her life reading that smell in boardrooms and negotiations. She knew it well, and now, it was all over her son and his wife. She closed the alert, locked her phone, and whispered to the empty room, "Got you." The doorbell chimed at precisely 8 the next morning. Elaine's phone pinged a notification before she even reached the door. Front camera, visitor detected. On her screen, a woman stood straight-backed, late 30s, her hair pulled into a no-nonsense knot at the nape of her neck. A neutral blazer the color of courthouse walls framed her shoulders. Elaine opened the door. "Mrs. Carter?" "Elaine," she corrected, stepping aside. "Come in, Detective." Detective Kara Lewis crossed the threshold with the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to kitchens like this. Too clean, too curated, owned by people who preferred appearances over reality. She glanced once at the new corner camera before following Elaine into the kitchen. The citrus scent of cleaner still hung in the air from Elaine's morning ritual. The table was neatly set with coffee cups, the paper folded at precise right angles. Elaine gestured. "Please sit." Kara slid into a chair, her notepad already in hand, squared to the table's edge like a chess piece set on its starting square. "I appreciate you agreeing to meet," she began, voice even. "The hospital forwarded toxicology results from the champagne your guest consumed. The analysis confirmed a cardiotoxic plant alkaloid, aconitine." She paused, watching Elaine's reaction. "Common name, monkshood." Elaine's lips curved faintly, though her pulse remained calm. "I don't serve that with hors d'oeuvres." Kara's mouth ticked at the corner. "No, someone brought it, which is why I'd like you to walk me through what you observed at the party." Elaine told her the truth, just not all of it. She described the chipped flute, The vial slipped from Brittany's clutch. The quiet switch, while Brittany admired her own bracelet. She recounted Marjorie's collapse, the chaos, the paramedics, Daniel's oddly measured response, but she left out the financial desperation, the late-night calculations, the transfer attempts to the decoy account. Those were cards best kept close until the right moment. Kara listened like a woman counting beats in a song, pen moving only when necessary. When Elaine finished, the detective leaned back. Has anyone else been in the house since the party? Elaine sipped her coffee before answering. My son, his wife, a courier from my lawyer, and the security company. She let the last word hang in the air like a dropped coin. Kara's gaze sharpened. Lawyer, I've updated some documents, Elaine said mildly. Medical directives, my will, my competence recorded in writing, in case anyone should question it. That's smart. Kara tapped her pen once against the notepad, a soft rhythm. More people should do the same. Elaine tilted her head. You've seen this before, haven't you? Families trying to make an elder seem incompetent. Kara's silence was answer enough. At last, she nodded. More often than you'd think, people get creative when they're desperate. They'll use doctors, paperwork, even kindness as weapons. Elaine smiled, slow and deliberate. I'm learning. They moved to the pantry, where Elaine retrieved the chipped flute from behind a stack of serving platters. Kara photographed it with a quiet click. Then to the garage, where Elaine opened the freezer and pulled the evidence bag containing the half-empty bottle Brittany had opened. Chain of custody may be tricky, Kara admitted, sealing the bottle into a second bag. But it's something real for the lab to testament. Back in the kitchen, she closed her notebook and looked directly at Elaine. 2 things. Elaine waited. First, don't drink anything you didn't open yourself. In front of a witness. Not even water at a restaurant. Elaine inclined her head. Already my rule. Second, if anyone tries to arrange a medical evaluation for you, without your consent, call me immediately. Elaine's smile thinned to something sharp. I'll keep your number handy. Kara rose, tucking the notebook under her arm. At the door, she hesitated. Mrs. Carter, Elaine, just remember, desperation makes people sloppy, but it also makes them dangerous. Elaine watched her step into the morning sun, her car pulling away down the street. The house settled into silence again, but it no longer felt like silence. It felt like the breath before a storm. Elaine poured another cup of coffee, steady-handed, steady-hearted. She wasn't frightened. She was waiting, and waiting had always been her greatest strength. The house was quiet that afternoon, too quiet for company. Elaine had positioned herself in the sunroom with a book open on her lap. Though she wasn't reading, she had angled her chair perfectly to watch the live feeds from her cameras on her phone, the way another woman might keep an eye on her garden. At 3 o'clock sharp, Daniel and Brittany arrived again. The cameras caught them before the doorbell even rang. Daniel's jaw tight. Brittany's smile stretched just a little too wide. Elaine pressed a button and let them in. They breezed inside, voices warm, bodies tense. Daniel set a bakery bag on the counter, always with the props, while Brittany carried a leather folio tucked under her arm. We brought the Silver Pines paperwork, Daniel announced, his tone bright. It's really just a matter of signatures now. Elaine smiled as though flattered by their persistence. Wonderful, she said. I've been thinking about it. She led them to the dining table, the folio spreading across polished wood, pages filled with promises of comfort and care. But Elaine saw them for what they were, shackles disguised as flowers. Brittany slid a sheet forward. If you're comfortable, we can also take this to your banks so they'll know to talk to us. Elaine tilted her head. Of course. I'd hate to confuse a teller. She rose casually. The copier's in the study. Make yourselves at home. Daniel and Brittany exchanged a glance. He scooped up the papers, and they disappeared down the hallway. Elaine remained seated at the table, one finger tapping her teacup in rhythm with her heartbeat. She didn't need to follow. Her cameras would do the watching. On her phone, the feed from the study came alive. Daniel opened the pastry box with the reverence of a thief unwrapping treasure. He lifted the tissue paper slowly, revealing the neatly written page. Financials. Temporary login. Elaine zoomed the feed with a pinch of her fingers. Daniel's lips moved silently as he read the username and password. Brittany leaned over his shoulder, eyes shining. Daniel pulled out his phone, snapped a photo, then carefully replaced the paper and folded the tissue with the precision of a man who thought he could hide the crime. Elaine sipped her tea, amused. "Oh, Daniel," she thought. "Even your deceit looks borrowed." Back in the study, Brittany drifted toward the bookshelf, running her fingers across the spines like a woman casing a stranger's home. Daniel tucked his phone away, his face smug in a way only hidden desperation could justify. They returned a moment later, their expressions smoothed, their voices bright. "All copied," Daniel said, sliding the folio neatly back on the table. "Everything's ready for tomorrow." Elaine smiled, that same warm, practiced smile. "Perfect. I'll review them tonight." When they left, their car lingered in the driveway. Elaine switched to the exterior camera feed and watched them argue in sharp gestures, Brittany jabbing her finger, Daniel shaking his head. Finally, they drove off, their taillights bleeding into the dusk. Her phone buzzed 5 minutes later. New login detected. Greenwood Bank device. iPhone IP. Greenwood neighborhood. Elaine leaned back, a slow satisfaction spreading through her chest. They had taken the bait, and every second of it was recorded. The drive to Silver Pines felt like theater. Daniel kept one hand on the wheel, the other tapping nervously against his thigh. Brittany, radiant in cream silk, carried a leather folio on her lap as though it were a holy relic. Elaine sat in the back seat, cardigan draped neatly over her shoulders, her reading glasses perched low on her nose. She looked, she knew, every inch the picture of a sweet old woman ready to be tucked away, which was exactly the point. The facility itself resembled a resort. Young trees lined the parking lot, their branches too thin to offer real shade. The beige lobby whispered with the hush of fountains and strategically placed art. A receptionist greeted them with syrupy warmth, ushering them into a lounge that smelled faintly of lavender and antiseptic. Elaine's eyes swept the space. Clean, orderly, polished, but beneath it all, she sensed the hum of machinery designed not for freedom, but for control. "Isn't it beautiful?" Brittany cooed, spreading her arms as if she had designed it herself. "So peaceful," Elaine smiled. "Very." Moments later, a woman in a white coat approached, hand outstretched. "Dr. Sims." The badge read, though her manner suggested she preferred to be called something friendlier. "Mrs. Carter, I'd like to run a quick cognitive screen before we proceed," she said, her smile bright, her tone smooth. "Just to make sure everything is in order for the admission process." Elaine let out a soft laugh, the kind meant to disarm. "Oh, I anticipated that." She reached into her handbag and drew out a crisp folder, sliding it across the table. The paper within bore a neat stamp in authoritative blue. "Board Certified Geriatric Psychiatrist, Full Competency Evaluation." "I sat for a full neurocognitive assessment just yesterday," Elaine said. "I thought it best to have something thorough on record." Dr. Sims blinked, her smile faltering as she scanned the report. Paragraphs detailing executive function, memory recall, abstract reasoning, all marked in strong, confident numerals. At the bottom, a declaration. Patient demonstrates full capacity to manage personal and financial affairs. The weight of the document pressed the air from the room. "Oh," Dr. Sims managed at last. "That's very thorough. Thorough is my specialty," Elaine said, her smile cool as glass. Daniel shifted in his chair, tugging his jacket cuff. Brittany's jaw clenched before she forced a laugh. "Well, isn't that wonderful? At least everything is documented." "Indeed," Elaine replied. "I wouldn't want there to be any confusion." The admissions coordinator, a young woman with a binder heavy enough to bruise, bustled in then, her voice bright. "Welcome. Let's just get the entrance fee deposit and a few signatures." She laid out the papers, each page laced with clauses designed to comfort and to control. Elaine flipped through slowly, eyes sharp. An entrance fee of $400,000, refundable, less processing charges, a clause about medical necessity reviews, polite wording for we can keep you if we decide you're unfit. Daniel leaned forward, eager. It's all standard, Mom. Just the fine print. Elaine's smile didn't waver. I do my best reading in fine print. Brittany's nails tapped against the table in a rhythm too fast for patience. The sooner we sign, the sooner you'll be settled. Isn't that right, Haley? The admissions coordinator beamed, nodding as though she were sealing a promise rather than a prison. Elaine closed the binder softly, her hand resting on its cover. I'll review these tonight. Big decisions deserve morning light. The silence that followed was sharp as a knife's edge. Brittany recovered first, her laugh brittle. Of course, we'll hold the spot for you. Elaine rose, cardigan slipping gracefully over her shoulders. Lovely, I look forward to it. Her tone was polite, her eyes amused. Because she knew the cameras in her home had already captured more truth than these papers ever could. And because, in this little play, she was the only actor who knew the ending. Rain misted the windows when Nora Blake arrived at Elaine's door. She carried a slim leather folder tucked under her arm, her trench coat damp at the hem. Elaine welcomed her in with a nod, leading her to the study where the cameras blinked patiently from the corners. Highlights, Nora said without preamble, sliding the folder across the desk. Her voice carried the clipped satisfaction of a woman who'd made a database confess. Elaine opened it. The first page was clean, brutal, and simple. Daniel Carter, personal checking account balance below $1,000, credit cards near their limits. A business line of credit rolled 3 times in 2 years. A bridge loan coming due in 3 weeks with a lender whose email domain screamed predatory. Elaine's lips pressed into a line. Her son. Her boy who once brought her dandelions and swore they were roses. She turned the page. Brittany Carter, owner of Carter Boutique. 2 quarters behind on rent. A cash advance loan with interest rates sharp enough to bleed. Credit accounts maxed. Worse still, a highlighted line item from 6 weeks prior. Online purchase. Aconite root extract. Herbal tincture. Shipped to a P.O. box registered to her boutique. Elaine stared until the letters blurred. Aconite, she said quietly. The poison, Nora nodded. Illegal to sell for ingestion in most states, but the internet doesn't care. The box was paid with her business account. Delivery scan timestamped the Monday before your party. Elaine's throat went dry, but her voice was steady. So she bought the vial. She planned this. She did. Nora confirmed. And there's more. She tapped another sheet. A soft pull on your credit last week. Legal in some circumstances if they click the right box. But the IP address routes back to Brittany's boutique Wi-Fi. Elaine inhaled sharply, the sound slicing through the quiet. Not surprise, confirmation, a colder cousin. Nora leaned back, her eyes assessing. She's probing your finances, fishing for weaknesses. And Daniel? His firm is a house of cards. Receivables optimistic, payables very real. Between the two of them, they're cornered. Elaine closed the folder slowly, the smooth paper cool under her palm. Her chest felt heavy, but not with grief. Grief had already burned away. What remained was clarity. Brittany wasn't reckless. She was deliberate, calculated. She hadn't panicked her way into a mistake. She had researched, purchased, and executed a plan. And Daniel had stood by, debt gnawing at his spine, and let her try. They'll come again, Elaine murmured. Nora studied her. Do you want me to dig deeper? Court filings, credit lines, new accounts. They won't be able to sneeze without me knowing. Elaine lifted her chin. Yes. Watch them. Every move. And tell me if they are connected to any doctors who evaluate elders for competency. Nora flipped to the last page. There is one. A geriatrician they follow on social media. Reputation for expedited evaluations. The reviews are polarized, convenient. Elaine said flatly. For a long moment, neither woman spoke. Rain ticked against the windows, steady as a metronome. Elaine finally stood, carrying the folder to the mantel where her late husband's photograph smiled down at her, gambler's grin intact. You'd have loved this part, she whispered to the frame. The part where I raise the stakes and hide the chips. When she turned back, her voice was steel. They wanted a vault they could crack open. Instead, I'll give them a trap they can't resist. Nora's eyes gleamed. Bait, bait, Elaine repeated, and in her mind, the walls around Daniel and Brittany tightened one notch closer. By the end of the week, Elaine felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. Not the kind that makes you stumble, but the kind that signals a trapdoor ready to open. Detective Carol Lewis called first. The lab confirmed the champagne contained aconitine, she said. Enough to incapacitate, maybe kill. Chain of custody's messy, but it's something. Elaine thanked her, calm as always. Inside, her pulse hummed with grim satisfaction, proof of poison. A thread tied neatly to the vial she had seen Brittany slip from her purse. Then came Nora. Her voice over the phone was clipped, precise. Financial logs preserved. Your son's cloud account shows the photo of that login slip. Brittany's iPhone fingerprints on the transfer attempts. Digital evidence doesn't lie, Elaine. And finally, Leonard, her lawyer. The surveillance feeds are gold, he said, voice tinged with admiration. We've got them on video snooping, photographing, even adjusting burners in your kitchen. Courts love footage. It's hard to argue with a time-stamped image. Piece by piece, the case was building. Toxicology, financial desperation, surveillance, each strand weaving into a net strong enough to hold even the slipperiest fish. But Elaine knew better than to celebrate early. Greed didn't give up quietly. Desperation always had one more act left. So she played her role. When Daniel texted, "Silver Pines has an opening, we should move quickly," she responded with a thumbs-up emoji. When Brittany called, her voice syrupy sweet, asking, "Are you eating well? Sleeping okay?" Elaine chuckled into the phone, answering with grandmotherly warmth. "You're so thoughtful, dear." And when they arrived uninvited again, bringing glossy brochures and practiced concern, Elaine smiled, nodded, and even let her glasses slip down her nose to look a little softer, a little older. Inside, she was a fortress. Every laugh was a shield. Every nod was a lure. Every word was designed to let them think they were winning. Because the truth was simple. Daniel and Brittany were already inside the snare. Their own fingerprints, their own devices, their own mistakes had tied them there. All Elaine had to do now was let them tighten the ropes themselves. She poured tea in delicate cups, her hand steady. "Tomorrow, then," she said brightly. "We'll finalize everything tomorrow." Daniel smiled, relief flooding his face. Brittany's eyes glittered, triumph sparkling like champagne bubbles. Elaine raised her own cup, sipping calmly. Tomorrow would not be what they expected. It would be the beginning of their end. Evening fell heavy and golden, the kind of light that stretched shadows long across the floor. Elaine set her reading glasses on the coffee table and waited. She didn't need the cameras to know they would come. Desperation kept its own schedule. Right on cue, the doorbell rang. The feed on her phone showed Daniel and Brittany standing shoulder to shoulder, the picture of supportive family. Daniel carried another folio. Brittany clutched her phone like a lifeline. Elaine let them in. "Mom?" Daniel began, his voice pitched warm, persuasive. "We've prepared everything. Silver Pines needs confirmation tonight." Brittany slid into the kitchen, her heels clicking across tile. "We'll just get the paperwork in order. You don't want to miss this chance, do you?" Her smile was radiant, brittle at the edges. Elaine returned the smile with practiced ease. "Of course not. Let's sit." They gathered at the dining table. Daniel laid out the documents like a dealer spreading cards, financial disclosures, admissions contracts, and the power of attorney they'd been circling for weeks. Elaine reached into her folder and pulled out a paper of her own. She set it on top of the pile. "I thought I'd be proactive. she said pleasantly. I spoke to Leonard. He drafted me a power of attorney. It's precautionary, of course. Daniel's relief was almost comical. His shoulders dropped, his jaw unclenched. Brittany's eyes gleamed as if she'd just tasted victory. Daniel scanned the page quickly, lips barely moving. He never reached paragraph 4. He didn't see the limits, the restrictions, the expiration. He only saw the title, Durable Power of Attorney. This is perfect, he said, looking up with a smile that didn't touch his eyes. We can use this with the admissions office. Brittany's hand fluttered to Elaine's arm. You're making the right choice. We'll take good care of everything. Elaine's smile sharpened. I'm sure you will. She rose smoothly. The copiers in the study. Help yourselves. They moved quickly, like predators too eager to notice the trap. On Elaine's phone, the study feed came alive. Daniel opened the pastry box again, lifting the tissue to reveal the slip of paper. The username and password glowed under the lamp. He photographed it, Brittany leaning close, her breath fogging the lens. Seconds later, Elaine's phone buzzed. Login attempt, Greenwood Bank. Transfer initiated, then another ping. Transfer blocked, daily limit exceeded. Elaine sipped her tea, calm as stone. The alert stacked. Password change attempt, IP traced, device fingerprint logged, every move preserved, every mistake immortalized. When they returned, they carried forced cheer like armor. Everything's ready, Daniel said. We'll finalize the Silver Pines contract tomorrow. Wonderful, Elaine replied. She let the word settle like sugar dissolving in water. The doorbell rang again. 3 firm knocks followed. Elaine's phone flashed. Front camera. Visitor detected. Detective Kara Lewis stood outside, her blazer sharp, her badge gleaming. Brittany froze. Daniel paled. Elaine rose, her movements unhurried. Excuse me, she said gently, and opened the door. Good evening, Kara said, stepping in. Her eyes swept the room, lingering on Daniel's clenched jaw, Brittany's stiff smile. We have questions about some financial activity linked to this residence, and about a toxicology report. Brittany's voice cracked. Detective, this must be a misunderstanding. Kara raised a hand. Ma'am, we'll need both of you to come down to the station. Her tone left no room for negotiation. 2 uniformed officers stepped in behind her, their presence filling the room like storm clouds. Daniel looked at his mother, searching her face for mercy. Elaine gave him only the smile she used to give adversaries at the negotiation table, the one that said, You underestimated me, Mom, he whispered, almost pleading. Elaine's voice was steady, calm. I survived 70 years by seeing the fine print you never did, and by remembering that numbers never lie. The officers guided Daniel and Brittany out, their protests tangled, their excuses thin, the front door shut, the echo lingering like the last note of a song. Elaine stood in her quiet house, the fortress she had built, the trap she had baited. For the first time in weeks, she let herself exhale fully. The reckoning had come, not with shouting or chaos, but with evidence, patience, and justice. Elaine Carter had not just survived, she had won. Betrayal is rarely loud. It doesn't always come with shouting matches or slammed doors. Sometimes, it arrives in silence, poured into a glass of champagne, hidden behind a smile, dressed up as concern. Elaine Carter had built her life on discipline, foresight, and resilience. She thought retirement might mean peace, finally stepping away from battles fought in boardrooms. But instead, she discovered that the fiercest battles don't come from competitors or strangers. They come from the people who should love you most. Her daughter-in-law, desperate and greedy, believed she could poison her way into wealth. Her son, drowning in debt, thought control could be disguised as care. Together, they imagined Elaine as vulnerable, frail, and easy to corner. They were wrong. What Elaine showed, and what her story reminds us, is simple. Never underestimate older women. Experience teaches patience. Years sharpen instincts. And silence, when wielded with intention, is more dangerous than any weapon. Elaine didn't fight with fury. She fought with foresight. She documented her competence before anyone could challenge it. She fortified her home, turning it into a fortress. She laid traps of paper and ink, luring her betrayers into exposing themselves. And in the end, she didn't just survive. She outsmarted them at their own game. Because resilience isn't about avoiding storms. It's about learning how to stand in the middle of one and let it reveal who's truly strong. Elaine's son and daughter-in-law thought they could reduce her to a signature, a set of accounts, a key to a vault. But Elaine reminded them, and reminded all of us, that dignity, intelligence, and strength don't diminish with age. They sharpen. So the next time someone looks at an older woman and sees fragility, let them remember Elaine Carter. Let them remember the champagne glass, the steady hand, the calm smile. Let them remember that betrayal is dangerous, but underestimating the wrong woman is fatal. And maybe, just maybe, we should all take a lesson from her. Protect what's yours, prepare before you're cornered, and never be afraid to smile at someone who thinks you're weak, because sometimes the most underestimated people are the ones writing the ending. Now I want to hear from you. Did this story grab you? Where are you watching from? Or what time is it for you right now? Drop it in the comments. I read them all, and I'd love to know. And remember, silence isn't weakness. Patience isn't surrender. And older women, they are stronger, smarter, and far more dangerous than you think.